Kenneth Copeland is a name that reverberates across the landscape of American televangelism. For decades, he has been one of the most influential figures in the Christian evangelical movement. However, not all of this influence has been positive. To many, he represents the epitome of what can go wrong in religious leadership. From his ostentatious displays of wealth to his controversial theological teachings, Kenneth Copeland is a figure who has managed to both captivate and repel large sections of the American public. His presence in the evangelical community is as much a testament to his charisma as it is a reminder of the growing chasm between faith and fortune, humility and hubris. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. One of the most glaring reasons why Kenneth Copeland is a polarizing figure lies in his overt displays of wealth. At a time when millions of people are struggling to make ends meet, Copeland's luxurious lifestyle, funded by the donations of his followers, has sparked outrage. He owns a lavish mansion, a private jet, and a fleet of luxury cars. The extent of his wealth is staggering, especially when contrasted with the teachings of Jesus Christ, who advocated for humility and a life devoid of material excess. This contradiction between Copeland's teachings and his lifestyle has led many to question the sincerity of his faith. His prosperity gospel, a doctrine that essentially argues that faith can bring wealth and health, has been criticized as a manipulation of Christian teachings, designed to enrich himself rather than to spread genuine spiritual growth. The prosperity gospel that Copeland preaches is at the heart of why so many people have come to dislike him. The doctrine, which suggests that God rewards the faithful with financial success, is viewed by many as a perversion of the true Christian message. Instead of focusing on the love of God and the importance of serving others, Copeland emphasizes the accumulation of wealth as a sign of divine favor. This message not only alienates those who are already skeptical of televangelism, but also creates a dangerous precedent within the Christian community. By linking faith with financial prosperity, Copeland has effectively commercialized Christianity, turning it into a product that promises riches in exchange for devotion. This approach has made him a very wealthy man, but it has also created deep resentment among those who see his teachings as exploitative and self-serving. Adding to the reasons why Kenneth Copeland is disliked by so many is his repeated association with scandals and questionable behavior. Over the years, he has been accused of using church funds for personal expenses, evading taxes, and manipulating his congregation for financial gain. One infamous incident involved a television interview where Copeland defended his use of a private jet, describing commercial airliners as tubes filled with demons. This statement was not only bizarre but also exposed his sense of entitlement and detachment from the reality of ordinary people. It highlighted a glaring inconsistency between his lifestyle and the teachings of the Bible, reinforcing the idea that he is more interested in money and comfort than in genuine spiritual leadership. Kenneth Copeland's detachment from the everyday struggles of his followers is another critical factor contributing to his unpopularity. While his congregation is urged to donate sacrificially, Copeland enjoys a life of opulence. For many, this discrepancy serves as proof that he is exploiting the faith and trust of his followers for personal gain. The lavish lifestyle he leads is often justified by claims that it is a sign of God's blessing. Still, to the outsider, it appears more like the reward of a successful con. This disparity between the wealthy preacher and his often struggling followers has created a strong sense of disillusionment and distrust. For those who see religion as a sacred, selfless pursuit, Copeland's apparent greed and hypocrisy are a direct affront to the core principles of their faith. The controversy around Kenneth Copeland isn't limited to his displays of wealth and the promotion of prosperity gospel. His public persona has also been marred by his aggressive and at times bizarre behavior. Copeland's mannerisms, whether on television or during sermons, are often theatrical, sometimes veering into the realm of the absurd. His infamous interview with Inside Edition is a prime example, where his wide-eyed expressions and erratic responses raised questions not just about his character, but his mental stability as well. For many viewers, these moments are not only unsettling, but also emblematic of a man who seems more like a caricature than a spiritual leader. Such displays only fuel the fire of criticism, as they provide a stark contrast to the composed, humble demeanor one might expect from someone in his position. Another significant reason for the widespread disdain toward Kenneth Copeland is his perceived lack of empathy and understanding during times of crisis. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck, Copeland became infamous for his bizarre proclamations that he could blow away the virus through prayer. This kind of rhetoric, coupled with his refusal to comply with safety protocols, angered many who felt he was irresponsibly encouraging his followers to ignore medical advice. While countless people were dying and suffering, Copeland continued to make sensationalist claims that seemed more focused on maintaining his influence and authority than on genuinely helping his community navigate the crisis. His handling of the pandemic is seen by many as a prime example of his reckless disregard for the well-being of others, further tarnishing his already controversial reputation. Copeland's response to the COVID-19 crisis also exposed a troubling side of his leadership, his penchant for wielding fear as a tool of control. Rather than offering comfort or guidance during a frightening time, he used the pandemic as an opportunity to reiterate his prosperity gospel, suggesting that continued faith and, implicitly, financial donations to his ministry would protect his followers from harm. This approach is not just manipulative, but borders on the predatory, as it exploits the vulnerability and fear of his audience for his own benefit. Such tactics have left a bitter taste in the mouths of many, reinforcing the perception of Copeland as a figure who preys on the fears and hopes of his followers to amass wealth and power. Further compounding the reasons for the widespread animosity toward Kenneth Copeland is his often inflammatory rhetoric. He has a history of making statements that are divisive and alienating, even among fellow Christians. His comments are frequently characterized by an uncompromising tone that leaves little room for dialogue or understanding. This has not only driven a wedge between him and other religious leaders, but has also alienated segments of his own base. The relentless self-promotion and dogmatic rigidity of his public persona are at odds with the more inclusive and compassionate messages espoused by other Christian leaders. Many see his bombastic style as a deliberate tactic to maintain relevance and keep his followers engaged, but it has ultimately contributed to his growing unpopularity. The growing disenchantment with Kenneth Copeland is also a reflection of a broader trend within American Christianity, an increasing skepticism toward megachurches and televangelists. As more stories emerge of corruption, greed, and scandal within these institutions, Copeland becomes a convenient symbol of the problem. His ministry's immense financial success, coupled with a perceived lack of transparency and accountability, serves as a glaring example of how religious institutions can be manipulated for personal gain. For those who already distrust organized religion, Copeland represents the worst aspects of the industry: the commercialization of faith, the exploitation of followers, and the unrestrained pursuit of wealth. His presence in the public eye thus serves to reinforce the doubts and fears of those who feel that the spiritual needs of the community are being overshadowed by the financial ambitions of its leaders. One of the more insidious implications of Kenneth Copeland's influence is the way it has distorted the perception of Christianity itself. For many, especially those outside the faith, figures like Copeland shape their understanding of what Christianity represents. His flamboyant displays, coupled with his controversial teachings, create a skewed vision of the religion that can be off-putting to outsiders. This effect is not just limited to the perception of Christianity, but extends to a broader mistrust of religious leaders in general. When such prominent figures are repeatedly associated with scandal and greed, it inevitably casts a shadow over the entire religious community. This distortion is not just a PR problem for Christianity. It poses a genuine threat to the faith's ability to connect with new generations who are increasingly wary of organized religion. A recurring theme in the criticism of Kenneth Copeland is the apparent lack of accountability. Despite numerous accusations of impropriety and repeated scandals, he remains a prominent figure in televangelism. This persistence in the face of controversy points to a systemic problem within his ministry and, by extension, within the broader televangelist community. The lack of regulatory oversight, combined with the immense wealth and influence wielded by figures like Copeland, creates an environment where unethical behavior can thrive unchecked. This absence of accountability not only tarnishes his reputation, but also raises concerns about the integrity of the organizations that continue to support him. For those disillusioned with the current state of evangelical leadership, Copeland's continued presence serves as a stark reminder of the need for reform. The animosity toward Kenneth Copeland is further fueled by his relentless self-promotion and the cult of personality he has built around himself. In many ways, his ministry appears to be less about spreading the Christian message and more about promoting Kenneth Copeland as a brand. His face is plastered on books, DVDs, and television programs, all of which are aggressively marketed to his followers. This self-centered approach stands in stark contrast to the humility and selflessness that many associate with true spiritual leadership. It gives the impression that Copeland is more interested in his fame and fortune than in genuinely serving his community. This perception is a major reason why so many people are turned off by his message and have come to see him as a symbol of everything wrong with modern televangelism. Kenneth Copeland's ability to provoke strong reactions, both positive and negative, goes beyond just his wealth, controversial teachings, and erratic behavior. At the core of his divisive presence is his mastery of manipulation. Over the years, he has honed the art of persuasive communication, employing techniques that often blur the lines between religious guidance and psychological manipulation. His sermons are filled with emotionally charged language designed to elicit specific reactions from his audience. Whether it is fear, hope, or a sense of obligation, Copeland's rhetoric is carefully crafted to drive his followers towards certain behaviors, most notably donating money. This form of manipulation, under the guise of spiritual leadership, creates an environment where followers are made to believe that their financial contributions are not just encouraged, but spiritually necessary for their salvation or divine favor. The psychological techniques Kenneth Copeland employs are not unique to his ministry, but are a common trait among many televangelists who subscribe to the prosperity gospel. One such method is the concept of seed faith, which Copeland frequently promotes. The idea is simple yet manipulative. Followers are encouraged to sow a seed in the form of a financial gift to the ministry, with the promise that this seed will grow into a much larger blessing from God. This teaching preys on the desperation and hope of people who are struggling, suggesting that their financial contributions could lead to divine intervention in their lives, whether in the form of healing, financial breakthrough, or other miracles. What Copeland has mastered is the ability to make these teachings sound deeply spiritual and rooted in faith, even though they often operate more like a transactional scheme that has more in common with a pyramid scheme than with genuine Christian doctrine. The intersection of Kenneth Copeland's ministry with politics adds another layer of complexity to his polarizing persona. Copeland has not shied away from using his platform to endorse political candidates and influence political discourse, which has further alienated those who believe that religion should remain separate from politics. His outspoken support for certain political figures, particularly those who align with his conservative ideology, has turned his ministry into a quasi-political entity. This blending of faith and politics is troubling for many because it appears to compromise the supposed neutrality and inclusivity of religious teachings. By taking a clear stance on divisive political issues, Copeland risks alienating segments of his audience who may not share his political views. This politicization of his platform suggests that his ultimate goal is not just spiritual leadership, but also political influence, a combination that is viewed with suspicion by both religious and secular observers. Kenneth Copeland's approach to ministry also includes an element of spiritual exclusivity, which serves to further consolidate his power over his followers. He frequently presents himself as having a special, almost unique understanding of God's will, positioning himself as a conduit between God and his followers. This tactic is common among leaders who seek to create a sense of dependency within their followers, making them feel that only through the leader can they truly connect with the divine. By elevating himself to such a status, Copeland effectively isolates his followers from other sources of spiritual insight and criticism. This kind of spiritual gatekeeping not only reinforces his authority, but also makes it much harder for his followers to question his teachings or actions, creating a closed environment where dissent is discouraged, if not outright condemned. Another troubling aspect of Kenneth Copeland's ministry is the way it commodifies miracles and blessings. For Copeland, miracles are not random acts of divine intervention, but rewards that can be earned or bought through faith, and more importantly, through financial contributions to his ministry. This monetization of divine grace is highly problematic for many Christians who believe that God's love and blessings are freely given, not earned through financial transactions. By treating spiritual gifts as commodities, Copeland undermines the foundational Christian belief in grace. This transactional approach to faith has led to widespread criticism, as it not only distorts the nature of God's generosity, but also places an undue burden on believers who are made to feel that their financial status affects their worthiness in God's eyes. What sets Kenneth Copeland apart from other televangelists is his ability to adapt and remain relevant in the ever-evolving landscape of modern media. From television to digital streaming, Copeland has been quick to leverage new platforms to expand his influence. His ministry has a significant presence on social media, where his sermons and teachings are shared with a global audience. This savvy use of technology allows him to maintain a constant presence in the lives of his followers, reinforcing his teachings and cultivating a loyal base that spans far beyond the United States. However, this also means that his controversial messages reach a broader audience, amplifying the impact of his more contentious statements and actions. The digital era has enabled Copeland to build a brand that is both omnipresent and polarizing, allowing his influence to grow even as criticism against him mounts. The global reach of Kenneth Copeland's ministry has not only expanded his audience, but also brought his controversial practices under greater scrutiny. In countries where the prosperity gospel is less prevalent, Copeland's teachings have often been met with skepticism or outright hostility. Critics argue that his brand of Christianity is not just an American export, but a form of spiritual imperialism that exploits vulnerable populations worldwide. This has led to accusations that Copeland is not merely a controversial figure in the United States, but a global purveyor of religious exploitation. His willingness to spread his prosperity gospel across different cultural and economic contexts has only fueled the perception that his primary goal is financial gain rather than genuine spiritual growth. Kenneth Copeland's ministry also employs a significant amount of spectacle and performance, which has drawn both intrigue and disdain. His sermons are often characterized by dramatic gestures, powerful declarations, and sometimes outright bizarre behavior. This theatrical style is undoubtedly effective in captivating his audience and keeping them engaged. Still, it also raises questions about the authenticity of his message. For many, Copeland's over-the-top presentation feels more like a performance than a sincere effort to spread the word of God. Theatrics, while effective in maintaining audience attention, also lend an air of inauthenticity to his ministry, making it difficult for outsiders to take his message seriously. The spectacle of his sermons, combined with his controversial claims and behaviors, creates a persona that is larger than life, but also deeply divisive. One of the more disturbing aspects of Kenneth Copeland's approach to faith is his frequent use of fear as a motivational tool. Fear of demonic influence, fear of losing God's favor, and fear of financial or physical ruin are recurring themes in his teachings. This fear-based approach to spirituality is not only manipulative but also psychologically damaging to his followers. It creates an environment where followers are not motivated by love or genuine faith, but by anxiety and a desperate desire to avoid divine punishment. By framing faith as a battleground where constant vigilance and, of course, financial contributions are required, Copeland creates a cycle of dependency that keeps his followers coming back. This use of fear to maintain control is a hallmark of coercive leadership and has been a major point of criticism against him. In addition to his controversial teachings and manipulative tactics, Kenneth Copeland's ministry has been criticized for its lack of genuine community engagement and support. While Copeland's sermons often emphasize the importance of financial contributions to his ministry, there is comparatively little emphasis on the kind of grassroots community support that many other religious organizations prioritize. For example, traditional churches often focus on charity work, community building, and social justice, working to address the tangible needs of their congregations and neighborhoods. In contrast, Copeland's ministry seems primarily focused on promoting his brand and increasing donations, with far less emphasis on community service or social welfare initiatives. This narrow focus on wealth and prosperity has made it difficult for many to see his ministry as a force for good in the broader community. Moreover, Kenneth Copeland's portrayal of himself as a spiritual warrior fighting against evil forces often borders on paranoia. His frequent references to spiritual warfare, demonic possession, and other supernatural threats create an atmosphere of fear and urgency. This heightened sense of conflict serves to rally his followers around him, presenting him as the sole figure capable of leading them through these supposed battles. However, this narrative also isolates his followers from more moderate voices within Christianity, further entrenching them in his particular brand of radical theology. By framing himself as a warrior against evil, Copeland not only justifies his extreme rhetoric and behavior, but also makes it difficult for his followers to disengage from his ministry without feeling like they are abandoning a spiritual cause. Copeland's use of language is another point of contention. He frequently employs jargon and terminology that can be difficult for outsiders to understand, creating a barrier that separates his followers from those who might question his teachings. This specialized language serves to create an in-group mentality where followers feel they are part of a unique community with special knowledge. It also makes it easier for him to control the narrative, as only those within his circle are fully versed in the meanings and implications of his teachings. This tactic of creating a linguistic barrier is a classic method of reinforcing group identity and loyalty, but it also serves to insulate his followers from outside criticism and alternative viewpoints. The economic implications of Kenneth Copeland's prosperity gospel also deserve a closer examination. By promoting a theology that equates financial success with divine favor, Copeland effectively endorses a capitalist interpretation of Christianity. This approach is deeply problematic, especially in a world where economic inequality is a growing concern. His teachings suggest that poverty is a result of a lack of faith or divine favor, thereby blaming the impoverished for their circumstances rather than addressing the systemic issues that contribute to economic disparity. This perspective not only lacks compassion, but also promotes a dangerous ideology that can lead to further marginalization of the poor and vulnerable. For critics, this aspect of his teachings is not just misguided, but morally reprehensible, as it shifts the blame for social inequality away from systemic issues and onto individuals who are already suffering. Kenneth Copeland's controversial influence stretches beyond his individual ministry, creating ripple effects throughout the broader landscape of evangelical Christianity and religious broadcasting. His methods and teachings have indirectly shaped how other televangelists and religious leaders approach their ministries, often encouraging a model that prioritizes wealth accumulation and media presence over traditional forms of spiritual guidance. This shift has led to the proliferation of what some critics call a prosperity industrial complex within American Christianity, where faith is increasingly marketed as a product, and religious leaders are viewed more like CEOs than shepherds of a flock. Copeland's approach has set a precedent that has inspired others to adopt similar tactics, amplifying the reach and impact of the prosperity gospel and cementing his role as a central figure in a wider problematic trend. The spread of Copeland's influence also raises concerns about the erosion of doctrinal integrity within many Christian communities. As more pastors and religious leaders adopt the prosperity gospel to attract larger congregations and financial support, traditional Christian teachings centered on humility, service, and sacrifice are often overshadowed by messages focused on wealth, success, and personal empowerment. This shift in focus has led to what some scholars describe as a theological dilution, where the richness and complexity of Christian doctrine are reduced to simplistic formulas for material success. By popularizing this approach, Copeland has contributed to a theological landscape that is increasingly transactional, where divine favor is perceived as something that can be bought or earned rather than freely given through grace. Beyond the realm of theology, Kenneth Copeland's style and rhetoric have also influenced the communication strategies of other public figures, particularly those outside the traditional religious domain. His bombastic style, theatrical presentation, and ability to invoke strong emotional responses have been mirrored by certain political and media personalities who recognize the power of spectacle in maintaining a loyal following. In this way, Copeland's legacy extends beyond the church and into the wider cultural context, where the lines between religious leadership, political activism, and entertainment are increasingly blurred. This melding of styles not only raises ethical questions about the role of religious figures in public life, but also underscores the growing complexity of media influence in shaping public opinion and belief systems. Another significant area affected by Copeland's influence is the financial management practices of religious organizations. Kenneth Copeland's success in building a vast personal fortune through his ministry has set a model for how religious entities can operate as highly profitable businesses. This business-like approach often involves aggressive fundraising tactics, strategic branding, and the leveraging of tax-exempt status to maximize financial gain. While these methods have proven effective in generating substantial revenue, they have also led to increased scrutiny from both the public and governmental authorities. Critics argue that the blending of religious mission with corporate profit motives undermines the ethical and moral foundations of faith-based organizations. The practices pioneered by Copeland have thus contributed to a broader debate about the role of money in religion and the need for greater transparency and accountability. In addition to the economic and theological implications, Copeland's ministry has had a profound psychological impact on his followers and detractors alike. His teachings on prosperity and divine favor often create a paradoxical environment of both hope and despair. Followers who experience financial or personal success are quick to attribute it to their faith, as Copeland encourages, but those who do not see such results may be left feeling inadequate or unworthy. This dichotomy fosters a culture of spiritual anxiety where one's standing with God is constantly called into question based on material outcomes. This psychological toll is compounded by the pressure to give financially, often leading to financial strain among followers who may already be struggling. Such an environment can lead to feelings of guilt, failure, and a distorted understanding of faith and spirituality. Moreover, Kenneth Copeland's influence has not been limited to his followers and the religious community. It has also significantly impacted how secular society views Christianity, particularly in America. For those outside the faith, Copeland has become a representative figure of what they perceive as the hypocrisy and excesses of modern evangelical Christianity. His often sensationalist and extravagant public persona has, in many ways, reinforced negative stereotypes about religious leaders as being greedy, manipulative, or out of touch with reality. This perception can create barriers to interfaith dialogue and understanding, as Copeland's brand of Christianity appears to many as a far cry from the teachings of humility, service, and sacrifice traditionally associated with the faith. As a result, Copeland's actions have not only affected his immediate followers, but also contributed to a broader cultural divide between religious and secular communities. Copeland's approach has also highlighted a concerning trend within religious leadership related to personality cults and the concentration of power. By positioning himself as a uniquely anointed leader with special insight into God's will, Copeland has created a hierarchical dynamic within his ministry that discourages questioning and encourages blind loyalty. This concentration of authority is not only dangerous in religious contexts, but mirrors problematic patterns seen in authoritarian regimes, where power is concentrated in the hands of a few, and dissent is not tolerated. Such a structure allows for the unchecked growth of influence and wealth, while minimizing accountability. This dynamic can lead to abuses of power, and a culture where followers are discouraged from seeking alternative viewpoints, or questioning the actions of their leader. Further complicating the impact of Kenneth Copeland's ministry is his approach to ecumenism, or the lack thereof. Rather than fostering a sense of unity among different Christian denominations, Copeland has often created division by aggressively promoting his particular brand of theology as the only legitimate interpretation of Christianity. This exclusive stance not only alienates Christians who hold different theological views, but also hampers efforts toward greater unity within the faith community. In an era where religious tolerance and interdenominational cooperation are increasingly important, Copeland's divisive approach serves as a roadblock to meaningful dialogue and collaboration among Christian groups. This lack of ecumenical spirit not only isolates his ministry, but also perpetuates divisions within the broader Christian community. Another dimension of Copeland's impact is his use of media to craft and control his public image. Unlike traditional pastors who may rely on their local congregations for support and feedback, Copeland has used television, radio, and the internet to create a highly curated persona that reaches millions. This carefully managed public image allows him to present himself in a way that aligns with his teachings on prosperity and divine favor, often shielding his followers from the controversies and criticisms that surround him. The controlled nature of his media presence means that his followers are often only exposed to content that reinforces his authority and legitimacy, creating an echo chamber effect that further entrenches their loyalty. This selective presentation is a powerful tool for maintaining influence, but also raises ethical questions about transparency and honesty in religious leadership. Kenneth Copeland's ministry has also played a role in shaping the discourse around mental health within evangelical circles. His teachings often emphasize spiritual solutions to psychological problems, promoting the idea that faith, prayer, and financial giving can solve issues like depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges. This perspective can be harmful, as it may discourage followers from seeking professional help or taking a more holistic approach to mental health. By framing mental health issues as primarily spiritual problems, Copeland's teachings risk stigmatizing those who struggle with such conditions and reinforcing the false notion that mental illness is a sign of weak faith. This narrative is particularly damaging in a context where mental health care is already stigmatized and can have serious consequences for individuals who may need more comprehensive support. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Kenneth Copeland? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.